Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down my week number 2 top 36 wide receiver rankings and tiers for the 2024 fantasy football season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to check out my updated rankings after today's video, there may be some changes. My quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, kicker, and defense rankings are available on the Patreon for purchase, $7.50 a month. Link in the video description. So without further ado, let's get into my top 36 wide receiver rankings and tiers for the 2024 fantasy football season, week number 2. We begin in the S tier at the wide receiver position with my wide receivers 1 through 7 for week number 2, beginning at 1 with Cooper Kupp of the LA Rams, going up against the Arizona Cardinals this week in Arizona. Last week, Cooper Kupp saw 21 targets up against the Lions, 14 receptions, 110 yards, and a touchdown as the wide receiver 2. And while I do not believe that he's going to get 21 targets yet again up against a terrible Arizona Cardinals defense, with Puka Nacua out, Cooper Kupp is in the driver's seat as the clear number 1 wide receiver in this offense. And with this being such a wet dream, great matchup up against the Cardinals, I expect Cooper Kupp to feast. At number 2, we got CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys going up against the New Orleans Saints. Now, this is definitely not as great of a matchup as the Arizona Cardinals. Now, last week, the New Orleans Saints absolutely shut down Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers, but I do think there's a big difference in the offense of the Carolina Panthers compared to the Dallas Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb did have a down game last week as the wide receiver 23 in PPR, but he did go up against a stout Browns defense, and he was coming out of that holdout, so I think we see more usage out of CeeDee Lamb. I don't think there is any reason to panic based on what we saw in week 1. At number 3, we got Amon-Ra St. Brown, another guy that I want to make sure you guys don't panic about. I get he was the wide receiver 72 last week, and based upon where you drafted him, he basically kicked you right in the gonads. But this week, I expect a huge bounce back game. He is still the clear, undisputed wide receiver 1 on a very good offense. This game has all the makings to be a rock'em sock'em robots, high scoring back and forth affair with the Buccaneers. So I love Amon-Ra St. Brown in this spot. At number 4, we move to AJ Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles, going up against the Atlanta Falcons in prime time on Monday Night Football. Last game for AJ Brown was prime time in Brazil, the BBL Bowl, and he was the wide receiver 7 on the week. 10 total targets. This Kellen Moore offense seems great for AJ Brown. He was a guy I had ranked as a top 10 wide receiver all offseason, and no one to be surprised with the game he had last week as the wide receiver 7. I think he is an incredibly safe play game in and game out, and I like this matchup a ton up against Atlanta. Next up, we got Rashee Rice. Now, Rashee Rice came out the gate on fire, NBA Jam style, 7 receptions on 9 targets for 103 yards, 17 fantasy points as the wide receiver number 14. Now going up against the Bengals defense that does not look very good at all. I'm not going to completely write them off, but with Hollywood Brown now on IR, with Rashee Rice being in a main competition with Travis Kelce and Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice is going to see 9, 10, 11, 12 potential targets in any given game. So Rashee Rice should be a guy you rank in the top 10 very easily. Next up, we move to Magic Mike Evans going up against the Detroit Lions in Detroit. Mike Evans shoved his cock down the throat of the Washington Commanders last week in an incredibly easy matchup. This one's obviously going to be a little bit tougher up against the Detroit Lions, but as I said with Amon-Ra St. Brown, this is a game that really has that high scoring upside. You can smell it through the screen. It reeks of a high scoring back and forth affair. Mike Evans might have reached Unk status at this point. He's getting old in the NFL. But he's the clear number 1 wide receiver on the Buccaneers in a matchup that's going to be high scoring, where he was just the wide receiver 6 last week. So ranking him anywhere outside of the S tier to me would seem a little bit delusional. Next up, we got a guy that was definitely a letdown last week, and that was Garrett Wilson going up against the 49ers. He did have 11 targets, 6 receptions, and 60 receiving yards. Allen Lazard got all of the fame, though, because he scored 2 touchdowns. The Tennessee Titans defense locked up Caleb Williams and threw away the key. This week, though, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to look to drop the door down, bust the door in, FBI open up style, and I think Garrett Wilson is going to have a great game. Again, while we can take week 1 in and realize, oh, this happened in week 1, this happened in week 1, this was good, this was bad. You don't want to completely change all of your prior opinions after one game, because what that's going to do is it's going to tell you, oh, Garrett Wilson is now trash. Aaron Rodgers didn't look great, this, that, and the other thing. And then in week number 2, when they bounce back and have a great game, you're going to be like, oh, now I feel stupid. Now we move on into the A tier here with Justin Jefferson leading things off here. And while Justin Jefferson is stuck with Mono Man Sam, things looked promising in week 1 against the Giants. I get Justin Jefferson was only the wide receiver number 17, but Sam Darnold is competent enough to realize he needs to feed the ball to Justin Jefferson. Now, the reason why Justin Jefferson didn't see more targets against the Giants is because they kicked the ever-living shit out of the Giants. They could just run the ball gently down the stream with Aaron Jones and friends, whereas this week, they're going to be fighting tooth and nail to stay in this game with the 49ers. On paper, not the best matchup for Jay Jettas, but Justin Jefferson, as we all know, is matchup proof. Next up, we move to Michael Pittman Jr. of the Indianapolis Colts going up against the Green Bay Packers. Now, last week he had 8 targets, but just 4 receptions and 31 yards. A huge letdown game for Michael Pittman Jr. This week they go up against the Green Bay Packers, whose defense could not stop the Philadelphia Eagles offensive attack last week. So I expect Michael Pittman Jr. to have a much better game. My only worry here is I think the Indianapolis Colts, unlike last week up against the Texans, where we saw that Anthony Richardson was throwing bombs over Baghdad, I think this week we're going to see a much safer approach to the offense, but that also might lead to a lot of targets going the way of Michael Pittman Jr., some safer routes underneath. Next up, we move to 9-inch Nico Collins, wide receiver of the Houston Texans. Nico cousin, let's go bowling. Nico is currently ill, not sick. Shout out Lil Wayne, wide receiver 13 last week. He is the clear number 1 receiver on this team. I know both the touchdowns went the way of Stephon Diggs, but what it'll tell you is if you watch last week's game, based on the usage of Diggs, it's not very likely Diggs repeats scoring 2 touchdowns. I love Nico Collins. I love CJ Stroud. And I just will not push him down because he was the wide receiver 13 last week and didn't even score a single touchdown. Next up, we got Malik Neighbors of the Giants going up against the Washington Commanders. He's dealing with a knee injury, but he is expected to practice in full today. He's expected to play on Sunday. Now, Malik Neighbors looked good out there. Up against the Minnesota Vikings, he looked great. The cold like Minnesota Vikings. The problem was the quarterback play. Daniel Jones can't hit a broadside of a barn. He could only throw the ball to people on the defense. But now, they're going up against the Commanders, one of the worst defenses in the NFL, if not the worst defense. So while he didn't have the best rookie debut, I think he is going to feast up against the Commanders. Next up, we got Chris Godwin, who had a huge game up against the Commanders last week. Wide receiver 8 for 8 for 83 yards and a tug. The old Chris Godwin is back as the Chris Godwin from last year, who wasn't getting a lot of work in the slot, wasn't seeing enough targets. This year, the exact opposite. We're seeing a whole lot of usage out of Chris Godwin, and I expect yet another great game here up against the Lions, as again, I really do believe this will be the highest scoring game of the week. Next up, we move to Deebo Samuel. Deebo going up against the cold like Minnesota Vikings. Now, Deebo Samuel had himself a day last week while Brandon Ayuk was dropping everything left and right. Deebo Samuel was all up in that defense. No Diddy. Wide receiver 12 on the week. He had 8 rushes, 5 receptions, 54 yards, over 70 all-purpose yards, and a touchdown. Christian McCaffrey might play. He might not play. If he doesn't play, that's actually better for Deebo Samuel, as Deebo will see a bunch of carries with just him and Jordan, the numbers Mason, basically operating as the running back 1 and 2. Deebo Samuel is an incredibly talented player. My biggest worry for him season-long wise is once Ayuk starts to gel a little bit better, I think things could go tits up for Deebo, but as of right now where we are sitting, it's a no-brainer to rank Deebo inside of the top 15. Closing things out here with Zay Flowers of the Baltimore Ravens. Zay Flowers had a solid game up against the Kansas City Chiefs. The fact that Lamar Jackson airmailed the ball through the uprights instead of throwing the ball right to Zay Flowers, who was butt booty naked wide open in the end zone, definitely hurt his finish on the week. But I do think this week up against the Las Vegas Raiders, there should be no doubt that you should rank Zay Flowers extremely high. This reeks of a bounce back game. Next up, we move on into the B tier here with my first wide receiver in this tier being Devontae Smith. Now, Devontae Smith had a great game in week 1, just like his teammate A.J. Brown. While neither of those games lived up to what Saquon Barkley did as he took a shit on the chest of the Green Bay Packers defense in Brazil, Devontae Smith was the wide receiver 18, 8 targets, 7 receptions, 84 receiving yards. This Kellen Moore offense looks so much better than what we've seen in the past out of the Philadelphia Eagles. They're really spreading the ball out a ton, and Devontae Smith is going to eat if he can continue to see this many targets every single week. This is a great matchup up against the Falcons, though my only worry would be that the Falcons might not be able to keep up with the output of the Philadelphia Eagles. But ultimately, Devontae Smith should see enough targets to make up for it, and if he finds pay dirt, he could easily be a top 10 wideout. Next up, we got Jamar Chase. Now, I told you guys to play Jamar Chase last week because, frankly, as long as he was going to suit up, I was not going to bench the guy drafted with the 5th, 6th, 7th overall pick, or maybe the 4th overall pick, or if he fell a little bit further. You get what I mean, right? A first-round fucking pick. You're not sitting that guy. He played more snaps than expected, which I wasn't surprised with at all. 6 for 6 for 62 yards. Obviously, nothing to write home about. The fact that the Bengals lost that game absolutely sucked donkey cock, but now they're back to play the Kansas City Chiefs. The question is, will Joe Burrow look good, or will Joe Burrow look like he did last week? Because Joe Burrow was seeing ghosts like his name was Sam Darnold. It was awful, atrocious quarterback play out of him up against the Patriots defense. Higgins, I do not expect to play, so it's going to be Jamar Chase, Yoshi Vasa, and the other guys out there, Mike Likiamagasiki, playing with Joe Burrow. I think Jamar Chase is going to see enough targets to keep his head above water, but I am hesitant to rank him super high, knowing that he's been on the injury report. He was a full participant in practice, holding out for the contract. This just doesn't seem like the best case scenario for Chase, but he should be fine enough. Again, you're not sitting him. The guys in the S, the A, and the B tier are kind of all guys that you just have to start. Now, Davante Adams was a guy that I loved last week, despite the fact that I hated him all summer in terms of thinking his ADP was just redonkulous, because where you're drafted him, you're hoping he's like a top 5 wide receiver, top 8 wide receiver, and I just don't think he has that in him with Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell. But last week up against the Chargers, I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I like the matchup. I'm going to buy in, and it didn't work. Now, I should have, I guess, went with my priors, but the matchup was too juicy, like Sydney Sweeney's behind, to make me want to just play him. But now that I saw what happened, wide receiver 37, now he's playing up against the Ravens. I think this is a fair spot for him. I don't got him ranked too high above ECR, too low around ECR. I'm around the expert consensus rankings. He'll get enough targets to be fine, but I just don't really see him having so many huge games this year. And I know Davante Adams won your league last year because he had a huge game in week 17. But if you remember outside of that, shit wasn't too hot. Shit wasn't too sweet for Davante Adams. Drake London, not looking good. Week number 1, 3 targets only. Kyle Pitts scores. The offense just looks trash. Kirk Cousins isn't planting correctly. He's not aligning his shoulders correctly. He's throwing the ball off his fucking front foot, his back foot. He's doing the goddamn hokey pokey out there. He's hitting the Harlem Shake. But I'm not going to just bypass Kirk this quickly. He is coming off the Achilles injury. But based on what we saw last week, Drake London shouldn't even be close to the top 10 at the wide receiver position until something changes. But I do still think that he's so good that it's hard for me to truly bury him. Next up, we got DJ Moore, wiki, going up against the Houston Texans. Now, the reason why DJ Moore isn't ranked higher is because Caleb Williams was terrible last week. Anyone with eyes saw that. If you had eyes, I feel sorry for you because you shouldn't have had to see that. It was terrible. The guy couldn't read a fucking Dr. Seuss book, couldn't read a page of Harry Potter, Floyd Mayweather style, but now they're going up against the Texans, a tough matchup, but DJ Moore saw 8 targets. He's the clear wide receiver 1. The other wide receivers on the team, Roma Dunze, I don't think he's going to end up playing. I think he is a long shot to play. Keenan Allen should play, but he's dealing with the heel. I think DJ Moore will be the wide receiver 1. If Caleb Williams could snap out of it, DJ Brown could be the number 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, one of the best receivers on the week. But as of right now, we can't get too optimistic due to the quarterback play by Caleb Williams. Next up, we got scary Terry McLaurin, another guy that had a down bad week, wide receiver 78. But what I saw out there was Jaden Williams, or not Jaden Williams, Stormy Jaden Daniels looked good out there. I don't know why I just combined Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams' name, but probably because I just talked about them back-to-back. Michael Jordan, 96, 97. McLaurin was kind of just an afterthought, right? He was just out there, and if you would have told me that the score of the game was what it was, right, super high-scoring game, I would have said, oh, Terry got at least 12 points. 10 points minimum. He scored 4 fucking points. But he's going up against the Giants this week. So if there ever was a game to have that bounce back, it would be up against a defense that couldn't stop me out there. Next up, we move to Chris Olave. Disaster, 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 nightmare, nightmare, nightmare for Mr. Chris Olave last week. Wide receiver 85. Shout out T. Higgins. No bueno. No bueno for Chris Olave. The New Orleans Saints offense was gelling. They were percolating. They were laying haymakers down onto the Carolina Panthers. Derek Carr looked like fucking Mahomes out there, but Olave only had 2 targets. Now, Olave is the best receiver on this team, but we saw last season that Olave and Derek Carr were never on the same page. And it wasn't even, they were a couple pages apart. They were like multiple chapters apart. And it wasn't good. But again, Chris Olave is so good. It's like after one down game, I'm not ready to panic yet, but the matchup isn't great. Next up, we close out the B tier with Brandon Ayuk of the San Francisco 49ers going up against the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. Just like the same page argument we just talked about with Olave and Derek Carr. Just again, chapters off for Ayuk and Mr. Brock Purdy. Purdy hits Ayuk right in the fucking hands and he drops the ball. Maybe if he was practicing instead of playing spank and tickle with Jaden Daniels all summer, then maybe Brandon Ayuk would have actually done something. But you know what? I'm not going to panic again after one down game. I think they'll figure it out. Maybe this game won't be the best, but again, I definitely don't advise sitting Brandon Ayuk. Before we move on into the C and the D tier, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our partner over at Underdog Fantasy. If you're new to Underdog Fantasy and sign up with code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description, you will be able to claim your free pick. Caleb Williams, total yards higher than half a total yard in the game. You match that with another pick from Monday Night Football on the Texans, or you do something from Sunday or Sunday Night Football, and if both of those picks hit, you'll receive 3 times what you put into your pick'em. If you do that, you will also use promo code Notorious, like I said, and get that first time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Make sure you guys check out Underdog Fantasy, promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description to claim your free pick, plus a first time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Now we move on into the C tier here with the first guy here. I just clicked the wrong button. I apologize. Marvin Harrison Jr., Maserati Marv. Now, if you had Marvin Harrison Jr., it felt like you just got hit with Thor's fucking hammer to the chest. 1 fantasy point in his debut up against the Buffalo Bills, a defense that did not look great last week. The Arizona Cardinals offense was percolating, and Marvin Harrison Jr. was not a big part of that. Kyler Murray was asked, hey, why don't you give the ball more to Marv? And then Kyler Murray, that short bastard, said, oh, it's not really my issue to get him the ball. It is your issue, buddy. You're the starting quarterback on the team. You might want to utilize a generational wide receiver. Now, Marvin Harrison Jr. looked slow. He looked incredibly slow. It was like in the Matrix when they slow down time to dodge bullets. That's how Marvin Harrison Jr. was running. But in college, he was super fast, so I'm not really too sure what is happening. Again, should you be ranking him inside the top 12 at this point? No, but guy's so good, like, eventually it's going to catch on. Next up, we got Xavier Worthy, a rookie who did not disappoint in week number 1. 2 receptions, 3 targets, 2 tugs, 21 rushing yards, wide receiver 11. Now, the fact that Hollywood Brown is now on IR and that Juju Smith-Schuster is the number 3 receiver is going to boost up Xavier Worthy a ton. Now, if he only sees 3 touches like last week and he doesn't spin the mystery box and open and get the ray gun, the thunder gun or something like that, a wonder weapon, and he doesn't get a touchdown, then everything has gone wrong. But if he can see an increased target share, an increased workload, Xavier Worthy could be a smash pick. But again, we have to be pessimistic. We have to be fair with things. If he didn't score, like one touchdown, he should have scored. That was easy. The second one was a little fugazi. So if he only scored one touchdown, he still would have been fine. But if he doesn't score, if he gets 0 touchdowns and he's only seeing 3, 4, 5 opportunities a game, it's going to be a very risky start. But the risk is worth the swing, in my opinion. Next up, we got George Pickens, GP, going up against the Denver Broncos in Denver. He is going to get the Pat Surtain treatment, which could end up with George Pickens getting locked up. Wide receiver 24 last week. The quarterback play by Fields was pretty meh. I believe Fields will start yet again, but I guess there is still a small chance, a minuscule chance that we end up seeing Russell Wilson, Mr. Unlimited, suit up. On paper, it's a great matchup, but because he has to go up against Surtain, it might not go too well for him. I think he'll get enough targets to be fine, but I don't think he's a safe play really by any means. Next up, we got Keenan Allen dealing with the heel injury. Wide receiver 59 last week, but he saw 11 targets. For Keenan, for DJ Moore, it's all about, can Caleb Williams figure it out? If Caleb Williams figures it out, then you are ecstatic that you drafted these guys. If Caleb Williams continues to play poorly, and by poorly is even a nice way of putting it, like absolute trash, then you're probably fucked with these guys. But if he figures it out, which I think he will, you'll be happy. But again, Keenan Allen being banged up at his age isn't very promising. Next up, we move to Brian Thomas Jr. Scored a touchdown last week, 4 for 4, like he was at Wendy's for 47 yards up against my Dolphins. Quick F in the chat. Everyone drop a nice F down below in the comment section for Tua Tagovailoa. I hope he's okay. I am not a doctor. I say this all the time. I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins. And while this isn't a laughing matter as a Dolphins fan, I felt like I took a bullet to the chest watching Tua get hurt again. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm going to give you my take. Whether I think, you think, all think, whatever anyone thinks, I personally would be shocked if he retired. Now, maybe you look back a week from now, Nick, that's a terrible take. He retired. You know, if he wants to retire, he can. He didn't retire last time. He seems to want to be out there for the team. Now, again, I wouldn't judge him if he did. I'm just telling you that's my genuine opinion. I think after the bye week, which is week 6, I think he's back out there. That's going to be my opinion on things. Again, if you have a different opinion than me, you think he should retire, that's fine. A fine opinion. I also think maybe in his best interest is to retire, but I just don't think he will. Something is telling me that he's just not going to. Maybe you guys think differently. Let me know in the comment section. That was brutal to watch, though. Terrible game by the Dolphins. We didn't even get finger fucked, right? We didn't get diddled. We did get diddled. We got they touched us in our no-no square. Hey, don't touch me there. Brian Thomas Jr., though, looked great last week up against the Dolphins. Now he gets a tougher spot against the Browns. I think he's going to end up becoming the number 1 wide receiver on this team. I think he's super electric. His workout metrics out of LSU would tell you that. Again, not the best matchup on paper, but I do feel very comfortable starting him. Jameson Williams feels like a firecracker type of play going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's been limited with the ankle injury. I get that he was the wide receiver 5 last week, but that was because Amon-Ra St. Brown was doing his best fucking John Cena impression. You couldn't see him. So Jameson Williams feels like that firecracker play. What I mean by that is he's either going to go out there and slap the defense around, front hand, backhand. He's going to go out there and fucking smack them with a baseball bat with, what's that called? Like barbed wire wrapped around it like he's in a zombie movie and go absolutely nuclear and be a top 5, top 10 receiver. Or he's going to be like the wide receiver 52. Early on in the season, I try not to take those risks. But with there being a lot of risks so far based on what we saw in week 1, I think he's a fine play. Next up, we got Tank Dell. Now, Tank Dell actually saw a ton of targets. 7 targets for him. 3 receptions, though, 40 receiving yards. 2 carries, 19 rushing yards. If Dell gets a touchdown and Diggs gets a touchdown, instead of Diggs with 2, we're looking at Tank Dell wildly differently. We're looking at Tank Dell like, oh, maybe we should have drafted him higher than Diggs, right? Maybe we shouldn't have been given the Gawk 9000 special to Diggs, but Diggs scores 2 touchdowns. So now everyone's like, oh my God, I'm panicking on Tank Dell. He had 7 fucking targets. This is a guy that could take any target to the crib. I'm not panicking yet, especially up against the Bears. Next up, we got Diggs. Now, if you wanted to argue, Nick, I want to start Diggs over Dell, go ahead. 6 for 6 for 33 yards and 2 touchdowns. I like to see him score 2 touchdowns again because I don't think it's going to happen. But based upon the usage of all of these guys, I think you're going to want to start them all every week. And one of them is just going to end up being kind of the odd man out. Final tier here, we got the D tier. Starting off with DK Metcalf. Now, I have DK Metcalf ranked way lower than consensus, but just kind of the fact, we got to call a spade. Maybe the Patriots defense isn't elite, but they're probably better than I and you perceived, unless you're a Patriots fan, right, who just thought that they're the best defense ever, right? Mayo seemed to have things figured out. They played sound defensively. DK Metcalf just went up against Surtain, one of the best corners in the NFL. Now he's going to go up against Gonzalez, another great corner. So while I don't try to read too much into matchups, if he was like the wide receiver 63, just like he was last week, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if he bounced back either, but I'm not ready to really give him some crazy bump up. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because he's so good, but I'm not ready to boost him up heavily. Amari Cooper's up next. Now, interesting enough, Amari Cooper has had so many 25-plus point performances with Deshaun Watson. The problem is that it's either a lot or a little with Watson. It's either Watson is out there not able to hit Amari Cooper for shit, or him and Amari Cooper are dialed in 5G LTE connection. Last week, it was the non-dialed in. 2 receptions on 9 targets. It's like they're playing basketball out there. Deshaun Watson's like bounce passing it to Amari Cooper, like trying to dribble the ball. Like boom, like a fucking, if you're watching the NBA when they bounce pass it, Jason Kidd style. Amari Cooper was the wide receiver 79 last week. But we've seen the upside. The matchup's good, but it's just really my doubt of Deshaun Watson. Next up, we got Christian Kirk, who did not play great last week. Only 1 reception for 30 yards. Same amount of targets as Brian Thomas Jr. Weird game, though, from the Jags. Very dominant on the ground. Could not pass the ball effectively at all. This week, though, tough matchup against the Browns. So again, with him and Brian Thomas, while I do have Brian Thomas ranked higher, wouldn't be that crazy for Christian Kirk to outscore him. But Christian Kirk, I didn't think looked the best. But again, one game, you can't really full-on panic just yet, right? If you have one shit game, I'm not ready to just kick you to the curb. Don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Next up, we got Demarcus Robinson Jr. Now, everyone and their mother has been giving the autofellatio to Monsieur Tyler Johnson, but I do think that Demarcus Robinson will outscore him. I just think Demarcus Robinson's better. 7 targets, 4 receptions, 42 yards without Puka in a great matchup against the Cardinals. That's a guy you want to take a shot on. Next up, we move to Jaden Riley-Reed, who was the wide receiver number 1, the number 1 prostitute in all of Kazakhstan. The number 1 scorer in all of fantasy football. Very nice. 6 targets, 4 receptions, 138 yards, 1 rush for 33 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jaden Reed is like basically Deebo Samuel, but I think a little bit faster. Jaden Reed is awesome. But now he's going from Jordan, love me tender, love me sweet, who I understand in week 1 wasn't out there surgical. He wasn't out there dissecting the defense, making all of the best plays. I get it. He looked a bit sloppy. He was sliding left and right due to the turf. But ultimately, I would trust Jordan Love 9 million times before I trust Malik Willis. Now, the game plan should be keep things close to the chest. Keep things close to Malik Willis. Make Malik Willis not fuck anything up. Let him do what he's good at. Let him run the ball. Let him throw these short passes. He does have a decent arm, but it's not really that accurate in my opinion. I don't think Malik Willis is very good. So the best case scenario here for Jaden Reed is a bunch of screens, some handoff, some end around, some fucking 360 no scopes from Malik Willis, where he does a 360 fucking jump shot KD, and it goes to Jaden Reed, right? That's what you're rooting for, right? You're not rooting for deep pass from Malik Willis, hits Reed down the sideline, in stride, touchdown, beautiful, chef's kiss, Manufweek. No, the only way that would happen is if Jordan Love could get into Malik Willis's mind or hop in his helmet like Ratatouille and control him. That's the only way that's going to happen. So Jaden Reed comes with immense risk. Huge risk. But the matchup's great. And if Malik Willis surprises a little bit, he should outperform his expectation. But again, there is so much risk with it. Next up, we got the Lad McConkey of the LA Superchargers going up against the Carolina Panthers in Carolina. Lad appears to be the #1 wide receiver in LA with the Chargers, but it was just week 1. If this week Quentin Johnston, who has no hands, maybe got more targets, I wouldn't be surprised. If Joshua Palmer had more targets, I also wouldn't be surprised. Week 1 is a liar, but going up against the Panthers defense, a defense that is trash. Anyone with half of a brain knows that. We should be in for a decent enough game out of Ladd McConkey, but the targets are questionable, and the fact that I really just think the game plan of the Chargers here is going to be Dobbins and Edwards. Run the ball. That's the plan of every game. They have changed Justin Herbert from this gunslinger, this super fun quarterback to watch, to a fucking, basically a short throw merchant, into a game manager. Now, that's not his fault. And it's actually better for the team because if you only have to throw the ball 25 times a game, you can serve the arm and you also get surprised, right? If you run a play action, you're like, oh, they're just running all the time. And then Justin Herbert, the pervert, hits you over the top. I mean, Herbert's an amazing quarterback. So good for him. His stats obviously won't be as voluptuous like Violet Myers' ass. It won't be as beautiful. But what I will tell you is that I think Ladd McConkey should be a safe play this week due to the matchup against the Cardinals. If you're talking about pure safety, I think he is the safest out of this group, and he also has a lot of upside. But again, I don't want to just write off the other receivers on this team because of one game. So that's kind of just my opinion on things. So the other wide receivers listed underneath this, if you just want like a barometer of guys that aren't in tier 5, the D tier, but are below him, we got guys like T. Higgins, who I don't think are going to play, Deontay Johnson, Joshua Palmer, Tyler Lockett, Calvin Ridley, Rashid Shaheed, JSN, Cortland Sutton, Jacoby Myers, Christian Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Johnson. After that, there is a very clear fall off. So hopefully you guys have the players that are actually on the screen right now and not any of the guys below that. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below. Like, it owes you some money. I'd really appreciate it. Make sure to leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. Again, check out Underdog Fantasy, link in the video description. You can sign up with code Notorious to claim your free pick, like Caleb Williams, higher than half a total yard. You match that with one other pick from Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, or one of the games on Sunday, and you'll receive, if it's just one pick, with that pick, it's 3 times what you enter, and you'll also receive a first-time deposit bonus offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So I really do appreciate you guys. Hope you guys have a great one. I will see you guys tomorrow with another video. I love you guys all so much. Hope Tua heals up. Have a great one. As always, guys, goodbye.